well. And I see some new people here too. So what we usually do, Hillary and Damien, is a quick icebreaker, and then we introduce ourselves as we go around in no particular order. And the icebreaker today is something that you might still have on your bucket list that you are thinking of. And I start because people usually get in a panic thinking that there's a right or wrong answer, and there never is. So I'm Joanne Roberts. I'm consulting. It's exciting because today is our first, I will call it, blended group of work groups of both our facilities and workforce models. Amy Brooks is going to hop on. She emailed me. She's not feeling very well today, so she's going to listen and participate however she can. With my leaving being a superintendent, something my husband and I have been talking about is doing the cross-country RV trip, making up for many years of not seeing each other with both of our jobs. I think that that'll be wonderful and also probably stressful at times, but that's definitely something that I am looking forward to trying to do in the next couple of years. Sunny, would you like to go next?
Certainly. Thank you. I am Sunny McFeetris. I am the director of the Dartmouth College Child Care Center. And I also report to the EVP at Dartmouth College. So I keep him in the loop of what's going on and bring back information from him as well. And I am also the president of the ECEA board. So I have lots of different hats. And still, I've crossed a lot of things off of my bucket list in the last 3 years, like jumping out of an airplane and all sorts of different things. But still on my bucket list is to take a helicopter ride to the floor of the Grand Canyon to have breakfast. So that might be happening in the next couple of years. I don't know.
You're so adventurous, Sunny. I love it. That is great. Fantastic. Hi, Allison. How are you today? You're muted.
Unmute myself. There we go. Sorry.
All good.
I'm Allison Chisholm, and I am currently working with, well, I have a private consulting firm that works on rural and economic development initiatives. And my current clients that I'm working with are the Grafton Regional Development Corporation and the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship. And that kind of covers, as we call it, the best West Coast on the East Coast. So that basically runs up and down all along the Upper Valley, all the way down to Cheshire County and on the Massachusetts border, basically. And I think that answers that question. And in the past, I have had I have dabbled in early child care when I was working with some other nonprofits that set up child care centers in their facilities as an auxiliary use of their facilities. And so I have been through the business analysis of the early childhood education process, but I have never been a provider or, I come at this from a very different side of the equation, from the business side. And on my bucket list, although I can't say that it's anywhere in the near future, but it stays on my bucket list, is I want to go to Africa. I've wanted to go to Africa for a long time. I could care less about going to Asia, but I definitely want to go to Africa. And so, that seems like a very unlikely bucket list thing to complete, but you put it out there in the universe and you see what happens, right? You never know. So, and with that, I will turn it over to the only other person I know on this call, Sean, and then everybody else I'll get to meet as we go through this process.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Allison. My name is Sean Mahal. I'm the city manager here in Lebanon. On my bucket list is a trip to Australia, which doesn't appear to be in the cards right now. I've retired, well, twice already, so this is my third career, and I just don't know when that's going to happen. But anyway, you can still have dreams and hopes that someday I might be able to get there. So that's what I have.
Damien, would you like to do an introduction? Welcome.
Sure. I'm Damian DiNicola. I'm from up in Randolph, Vermont. I'm chairman of the board of the Green Mountain Economic Development Corporation, also on the board of Vital Communities, and have been working even prior to that with a group here in Randolph that's working on hopefully trying to develop a fairly large child care center off exit 4 with the Orange County Parent-Child Center. In my spare time, I also have 2 relatively young kids, although out of the early childhood education age now, and I run a small law practice in town. And bucket list, I've got a lot on there yet. I've been to Italy a couple times, but I haven't gone to any of the areas that my ancestors are from there. So I'd like to visit both Sicily, the Genoa region, and more of south of Naples, where some of my family members are from at some point, and also like to get to New Zealand.
Wow, fantastic. Hi, Julie. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
I'm Julie McConnell, actually in semi-retirement after 23 years with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund. Did a couple of cycles with them. And I'm now working part-time with Early Learning New Hampshire on special projects. So some of you saw me earlier with my Community Loan Fund hat. I'm now back with my Early Learning New Hampshire hat. And because I'm in semi-retirement, I lots of things on my bucket list. I better get working on it. But I have one son who lives in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm hoping on one of my trips to visit him, I can plan a trip on the Rocky Mountaineer, do that train trip through some spectacular scenery.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Hi, Hillary. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. My name is Hillary Snide. I'm the Director of Human Resources for Sullivan County. Very much interested in this topic from a kind of recruitment and retention standpoint. In my world and working with the county manager, we experience a lot of hardships for our employees in the areas of childcare. Like others have said, I have 2 young kids. I have a 6-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter, so I've experienced it myself. So I come from both lenses, but here in this group with my professional lens of caring a lot about recruiting and retaining staff in our area. Bucket list is easy for me. My husband and I, we dreamed about it as a honeymoon and just never got to it, is to go to Ireland. His family is from Ireland. Everyone around me who's gone raves about it. So just solidifies every time I hear someone go, I'm like, that's right. That's why I need to get there. So like you, it's a traveling piece for me too.
Well, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Hey, Jesse.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessie Rady. I am a program officer with the Couch Family Foundation. So I approach this early childhood work as a funder. Early childhood is a strategic focus of the foundation. So it's an area that we've worked in for a few years in the Upper Valley and now looking more statewide in New Hampshire. And let's see, bucket list. I mean, I think New Zealand is probably top of my travel bucket list. Growing up, I had a friend whose family was from there and I sort of always wanted to go, but it's such a long trip. So we'll see. We'll see when I have the time to do that and the money.
You'll just have to make it longer with stops on the way.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel.
That
doesn't
sounds
feel like such a long
good.
trip. Hi, Faye. I know you popped in a little late. We're doing intros and then something that might be on our bucket list.
Hey, so Faye Grierson, Alice Peck Day, and I'm the Employee Resource Navigator. So recruit, retain, help employees find the childcare they need to be able to do their work with knowing their children are safe. Big part of what I'm hearing concerns about. My bucket list is actually a second return. Cinnamon Bay. It's on St. John. When my kids were young, we actually got to accompany another family there. And so on my dream list is to go with my adult sons back there and float around the waters of Cinnamon Bay. So.
Wow, that sounds like a song. That's wonderful. I'm gonna have to look that one up. Hello, Lori. How are you today?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lori Brown and I work at Mascoma Bank and I handle benefits and employee relations. And geez, I don't know. I say I'm too young to have a bucket list, so I don't really have anything right now I can think
There
of.
you go. Yeah, I got
Thank you.
plenty of time to do it all. I know,
Yeah.
Amy, you're out there and you're not feeling well, so just know we're thinking of you, and you can share twice next time. How's about that? So we worked on the charter. I sent a link in advance. And the reason I sent the link in advance was because for new folks to perhaps hop on it, it has the North Stars and it has the goals for each of the groups. And now that we're a combined group, I thought it would be nice for people to see the connections. And the reason that we combined was because a lot of the conversations were similar. So in regard to recruitment and retention, it flowed very well with, well, you know, if you build an EC center, what does that mean for recruitment and retention? What other models are out there that we're looking at? So because of that, and also I'm a person that really understands how busy everyone is. And so if we could combine it time-wise as well as communication-wise, in talking with Sean and Amy, it seemed like the best step forward. So I appreciate everybody being here today. We had participated in the Public Health Network Legislative Roundtable. So Emily Tenenbaum was there, as well as Amy. And at our steering committee meeting, Amy gave us an update. What they did was they shared their kind of their recruitment ideas, which is getting people into the pipeline. It's something that Amy and others have worked very hard to do and are making, I think, great headway in that direction. So the legislators would sign up for different subject areas, and then they would sit for a period of time, hear from those folks, those stakeholders, and then they'd shift and move to another table. And what was pretty exciting about it is having Amy there, as well as Emily from Let's Grow Kids. The legislators really learned more about the dire need and made some connections, and with a better understanding that's data-based on the work that's happening on the ground. So hopefully we captured their attention, and we will continue to work with them. Speaking of legislators, Rebecca Holcomb, she's not a legislator. What is Rebecca now? She just got voted to be in Vermont. She used to be the Commissioner of Education in Vermont. Does anybody know Rebecca Holcomb? I'll have to find her title.
I thought she did.
Senator?
I'm remembering, Joanne, this could be wrong, but I thought she was actually running for the legislature for a state senate or a state rep seat from Windsor County, but I could be wrong about that.
I think you're right. I just didn't want to misrepresent her title, but one of her platforms was early childhood education. And she is coming to a meeting with us on Monday, December 5th. So I'm going to open that meeting up for anybody who wants to attend who's part of our ECE initiative. And then the meeting that's on December 2nd, which is advocacy and steering, I will also invite anybody else who wants to participate on that. And the conversation is how do we figure out what best to share with Rebecca so she can take that information and bring it back and carry our voices with her and help to continue to advocate. I'm just going to check the chat. Vermont State Rep. Thanks, Amy. So that's pretty exciting that she's going to come. She's going to, she knows that we exist. She knows the kind of work we're doing, and we'll be able to share information with her. And I want to make sure that anyone involved in the initiative has an opportunity to be part of those conversations. So I will open it up to everyone to be there. One of the things that came out of the program models work group is a rubric. Sean, do you want to briefly give an update on the ECE concept? When I was talking with Damien, I couldn't help but connect the both of you in my mind, and also talk a bit about the rubric, please.
Yes, we have the RFI out for a partner to work with the city to develop a child care center in the city that we want to construct here on city property. Joanne and several folks on the committee developed a number of criteria that we will use to evaluate those proposals. And we have that now, and I'll be meeting with Joanne to finalize that tomorrow. And then we will provide that to, we have 4 different vendors that are, 4 different entities that are looking to submit a proposal. we'll submit that to them. It's not a bid process. It's an RFI, request for information for interested parties who might be interested in working with the city to do that. We've given them 90 days. I believe it ends in December with the updated date. But again, it's not a bid process. It's different. And then what we will do is we'll evaluate those proposals when they come in. We'll conduct interviews. I think Faye has agreed to be on that committee as well. And there was somebody else I think you might have had from DH that would work with us on that. So that's where we're at with that. I think there's 22 criteria that we'll be looking at on there. And yeah, that's the latest update, unless there's any questions.
Any questions on that? What I'm going to be working on this evening, Sean, is taking your original scope of work, because that's what was part of the RFI. Maybe putting those as the headers with the topics that are off the rubric, so it has a better format for you to then push out. So I'll bring a draft of that with me tomorrow, and we can take a look at it together. I know, Amy, you were looking as part of the pipeline, which is actually very exciting. And I hope on another day you can come and talk to us a little bit more about how that's going. But I wondered, are you able to, were you able to locate a modular classroom for that project? You can type if you want to. Or...
Yeah, right now we're I'm working through Sean, the city of Lebanon, on zoning or whatever, permitting.
Excellent. Good. I'm glad that's moving ahead. Once again, if I can help in any way, just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to do that. Allison, I know you turned off your camera because you're eating lunch, but one of the things that we are going to talk about, of course, right, it's always how it falls together, is the work that you are doing in building support. At the end of our last meeting, you shared a few of those ideas, and I was hoping today you could share them with the entire group, and maybe we can build into those as well.
Sure. So I'm super happy. I think, Julie, I'm not even sure. You and I may be on a meeting at 2 o'clock. I'm having a meeting with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund with Hannah Grimes folks. So let me, as I said in the beginning, where I'm coming at this from is the work of doing business support, both for existing centers and home-based providers, but also for newcomers who may want to open a center, with a real focus though on the existing centers, because one of the things that we know is that there is a lot of capacity within the existing centers, or even some capacity for expansion, if we can make them work and sustainably from a business point of view. So obviously, one of the primary concerns for the existing providers is recruitment and retention of staff. And that is the stuff that Let's Grow Kids and Amy's organization, Early Childhood Educators Association of the Upper Valley, and others are working on quite extensively. And I think that we mostly felt from this group's point of view that there was this other piece that we could take up, facilitating and amplifying the efforts that are going around business support. And there are quite a few efforts. And so part of the goal of the whole Vital Communities Initiative is not to duplicate or try to create programs of our own, but really facilitate the work that is going on out there and make the connections so that we take the very limited resources we have and make them work as effectively as possible. So here's what I've learned, and I'll be happy to share this Excel spreadsheet. I think the better way to do it is I'll share screen, but then I'll share it later via Joanne, and she can put it in our shared documents for review and that kind of thing. But a high level overview before I share this Excel spreadsheet is that, not surprisingly, I'm going to color you all shocked, Vermont and New Hampshire are going about this differently. I know that that is just a remarkable piece of news for everyone on this call, but that is the upshot. The most recent, and basically the Vermont initiatives are much more centralized and kind of more coordinated, and the New Hampshire initiatives are more spontaneous combustion, I guess is the way that I would describe it, happening in different regional areas with different partners, and some overlap and then some distinctive approaches. So we've got some of the experts on the New Hampshire side on the call right now, Julie and Amy. So much of what I'm going to say is going to be repetitive of what they can report to you. But on the Vermont side, Damien, your project through Green Mountain and that center is on the list. So let me start, and now I'm going to share the spreadsheet so that I don't lose track of things and get confused. So hold on just a second. Let me call up that spreadsheet and then I'll share screen. And again, I will make this as, I think, first of all, tell me, can you see it at all, or do you need me to enlarge the type? We're okay, everybody. I get blinder and blinder. I'm sitting at a gigantic desktop and I keep, boosting the typeface for myself. So here's what I have basically, the way that those of us that work in business support talk about business support is really kind of in these categories, and these abbreviations will help you as I walk you through this. There is one-to-one technical assistance. So think of that as traditional business advising, business coaching, et cetera, where you're working one-on-one. Then there is group technical assistance and cohort-based technical assistance, where you might work through a training or incubator kind of situation where you are getting support as a cohort. And so you have some peer-to-peer kinds of support. Then so that's the training and technical assistance component of it. Then there are other components of it. One of them is capital access. So where do you get the money for business? So capital access can mean linkages to investors. It can mean linkages to lenders. It can mean linkages to grants. So those combinations of capital access can be a part of the puzzle. And then the last little thing is what I will call, I call it shared resources, or this is the kind of thing like co-working space. Now that's not obviously necessary for childcare centers, but it can be necessary for other kinds of businesses. But the shared resources that are available now that Early Learning New Hampshire is a part of, for example, is combining folks into alliances so that they have purchasing power and can behave like a bigger organization in that alliance. Or you hear a lot about shared services, sort of the combined back office functions where multiple organizations can draw on shared services. And the business support model around that is oftentimes a way of, do you have models for how those alliances have worked, and can you help make those alliances work? I think that Early Learning New Hampshire is providing some of that business support around how do you get your back office set up so that you can take advantage of these purchasing power things, for example. So like, how do you get a system set up so that you know that you need to order 15 rolls of toilet paper every third Monday, or whatever it might be around those kinds of things. And I do think, and Julie can educate us if I've got this wrong, but as I read the CELA program, is that the way you pronounce it, Julie? Is it CELA? Okay.
Yeah, for the State Early Learning Alliance, yes.
Yeah, the State Early Learning Alliance. As I read that alliance, the nice thing about that is that it can actually extend to discounts and special benefits for the workers in the centers or family-based settings, or to the families in some cases, I guess that like, so think of it as like a Sam's membership, I guess, I don't know, or a Costco membership kind of thing. So that's the array of business support services that are out there. And there are very long-standing mechanisms for delivering those kinds of business supports to what I will call the traditional entrepreneur or small business. Early childhood education, early care businesses have not traditionally taken advantage of these for a variety of reasons. And we could go through a laundry list of them, but it doesn't really matter, except to the extent that some of that is structural barriers to accessing the services, and we should think about that. But it's time, right? Like part of what we know about the early care and education space is, from a business perspective, it is super hard, if not impossible. I would put my thumb on the scale of impossible to make these functional business enterprises unless you can achieve a huge economies of scale. And even then, oftentimes it does require what I will call, what folks have been referring to as the alternative income stream. It usually requires public support and subsidy of some sort, right? Like, and so the business support in this space really needs to be sensitive to some of the business realities, right? And have some sector specific knowledge. And honestly, in rural communities or rural states like New Hampshire and Vermont, having enough density of providers to get specialists in this sector is really hard. And what usually ends up happening is that there's a mismatch between, you either have the business expertise or you have the early care and education expertise, but it's a very rare person that has both, right? And so there's usually some translation that has to go on, and you have to get the business advisors and stuff to do a deep dive into really understanding, because the other thing that makes early care and education a difficult business model, even for the most sophisticated business persons, is it's a highly regulated industry, right? And so the regulatory environment has to be well understood. And this is where I think it's particularly challenging for providers in the Upper Valley, where you are sharing workforce across 2 state lines, et cetera, because the regulatory environment, while similar, is not identical inside Vermont and New Hampshire. And so you end up with some serious mismatches. And I mean, I'll just name like the one that just came up that really is not particular to this sector, but will ripple through this sector, is the decisions that Vermont just made about what minimum wage in Vermont is going to be versus the decisions that New Hampshire makes about what minimum wage in New Hampshire is, and how that drives entry-level positions in all sectors, but particularly care-oriented sectors. There's all of that. So what I have basically done is done a survey of what has happened in the past, and the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund and the COOS providers network in New Hampshire are to be commended for having been working in this for the longest that I could find in an intentional way on the New Hampshire side. I'm a little less conversant on the Vermont side, largely because my sources on the Vermont side we have not been able to connect as robustly as I have with my sources on the New Hampshire side. So I'm putting together pieces and parts, and if there will be difference. But what I will say is that the Vermont side, what's an interesting thing that is happening now that could really change the way that this is delivered on the Vermont side, is that they are that Let's Grow Kids has put as a part of their legislative agenda for 2022, getting funding for a business development center that is focused in this sector. And that model is really just building on small business administration models that work in all sorts of ways. So it would be the equivalent, like they have women-owned business centers now. They have veteran-owned business centers that are funded through the SBA. They have the largest part of the SBA funding, which is the small business development centers, or the SBDC, that are funded. So that is Vermont's approach to this, and it has some really interesting things to recommend it, particularly the idea of sector really specific advice, right? And that is where Vermont, now it all depends on the legislature, and the model for this is not as I haven't seen a really in-depth model of this. I think it's more still in the idea phases. So how it would actually get enacted and all that kind of stuff. It is like, this is what I put in my little notes. This is a state-funded centralized model aligned to the Vermont way and contrasted with the privately funded diffuse model aligned to the New Hampshire way. So that's what I have to say about that, but presumably if that moves forward, we'll learn a little bit more about it. Then on the New Hampshire side, and then the other thing on the Vermont side is this Orange County Center Initiative, Damien, which I'm sure you could give us chapter and verse about. I think that what the business support that Green Mountain has largely been able to provide, and this is where you could definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but this has really been in the capital access, that you guys have been helping put together the capital stack necessary to make this go. Is that right? Or should we add more to these notes? You're muted, Damien.
I'd say that for the most part, yes. I mean, what GMEDC does is we don't have money ourselves, but we help put together, figuring out how to put the funding sources together. And the other important factor of it is we would actually own the building. The challenge with our center is that we always have this cart before the horse problem. Which comes up often. You need, a building and a location, plus you need a provider, plus you need the funding, and you need all of it at the same time. But the building ownership is an important factor in it, because the Orange County Parent-Child Center, which already has its own facility over in Tunbridge, just doesn't have the staffing, the expertise, and also the ability to own and manage both the second building and also manage the construction process and development that it would take to go into it. So that's where our expertise would come in. And it also started before, I guess GMEDC has kind of been locked into it now, but before that, there was a completely separate group that had put together, how do we, both attract a provider and start a center in this area, that initially developed the business plan before we had a provider, and even before GMEDC was in the wings. So we also developed the business plan, I would say.
Okay.
That would make it work.
I'm going to put that in this sort of technical, business planning, we always put in the technical access category, or technical assistance category.
Yeah, another way to put it is our job was to try to make it as easy to manage for an incoming provider as possible. So to create the business plan, create the structure, and also create a capital stack that would reduce the initial operating costs as much as possible, so we could put more money back towards salaries and development and those things that would allow us to pay higher salaries and attract and retain folks, as opposed to the cost of the building and the center.
Yeah. So this is a very traditional business model for early care and education centers where somebody is providing this. It could be a nonprofit organization, like this is the landlord, Sean. I think this is a variant of the model that Lebanon is talking about right now. This is the model that I know. This is where I was working with a church in downtown Chicago, and they were willing to pay for the capital. So they basically hired an operator to come in and run the child care center, with the understanding that the money that they were saving from not having to pay rent, et cetera, could go to wages. And this is a, I'm going to call it a tried and true model. It always has a million variations to it. So it's not a plug and play kind of model, but it is. And I will say that I think that this is what, I mean, this is also the model. Not Dartmouth College is not using this model, Sunny, but I believe Dartmouth Health is using this model. They've contracted with the operator Bright Horizons, and then they provide the center. So this is also a model that a lot of employers use, where they will provide the capital, meaning the building capital, the facilities, and then either at no cost to the provider, which is usually the way, so that they just basically have an operational contract with the provider, and they can have some scholarshiping possibilities and stuff like that. So thank you for that delineation, Damien. And that is definitely, you know, and this is where I think exactly what we were talking about where these work groups kept intersecting was exactly here. Right. And so this is definitely a model, but it involves an existing provider being able to expand to a different operation. It also has the recruitment and retention byproduct of higher wages. And so I think that thank you for just being our test case of why we thought that working together would be smarter than working apart. And then on the New Hampshire side, I'm just going to call up some things that are in process right now. There's some historical things that are really important, but basically, so there's the stuff that the Early Childhood Education Association is launching with Amy's leadership, and it has there is this operations and facilities expansion project. There is you know, other technical assistance that they are providing to centers in the area. And then we are talking about sort of this capital access portion of this process. I don't think we've identified some sources for grants, but not a lot of sources for grants. And so that is the next sort of process, but we've identified some centers that will be involved. And the ECEA has been providing funding for these efforts. You're going to see a name pop up a lot, Kim Vada, who is a person who started working with the New Hampshire Charitable Loan Fund, and basically developed this expertise of working with centers. Her work has primarily been focused in northern New Hampshire in Coos County, but is expanding beyond that. Kim and I've had some really good conversations. She wants to find a way to scale it because Kim is only one person and you can't scale with one person. She's a limited resource. And she also feels like that we're getting to the place where some cohort-based delivery of services might be appropriate and help with that scaling model. And then the business support for the Directors Network in Coos County, that continues with Kim Vada. That was a project that got started, and this is all one-to-one TA. And then the Loan Fund is also providing business support. And then this is, I believe, and this is where all of you that are, I'm checking this data as I go. So it may be modified by the next time you see this spreadsheet, but as I understand it, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund has partnered with Early Learning New Hampshire. So Lori McConnell, are you still on this call? And have I at least got that, McConnell, is that I'm at least right so far?
Absolutely. And these are the efforts that I'm very much involved with. So happy to speak to any of this. if
Okay,
needed.
great. So maybe you can just, so there, as I understand that this is modeling itself after the work that has been done in Coos County, but it's to spread it more broadly and to, instead of having Kim Vada or others go in and do the assessment of needed business improvement, the first step is to develop this business self-assessment tool. Is that right? Or you want to describe, maybe you could just describe it. I'll just take notes. Maybe that would be
There are
better.
many different components that are evolving. When I was with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, I developed the Business of Childcare Initiative. We piloted it, as you said, in Coos County, and we have since expanded it to other parts of the state. The work with Early Learning New Hampshire was recognizing that the Community Loan Fund and Early Learning New Hampshire were both trying to bring some targeted business supports to the sector. So we secured funding this last year to really combine those efforts, recognizing that programs, particularly coming out of the pandemic with the loss of the federal grants and funding, how do we look at stabilizing these programs for the future? And that's a serious ongoing challenge, as we know, because of the staffing crisis. So the business supports are really twofold, trying to enhance what Early Learning New Hampshire can deliver with CELA, both through the online platform and then the shared savings and cost savings that you were speaking to. And then folding in some of the business of childcare components with some of those identified programs that we are working with. And that means having them complete the business self-assessment that was developed with Kim Vada, and then identifying any additional technical assistance needs that they may have. So the Business of Childcare Initiative had components of both the direct one-on-one TA coming out of that self-assessment process, as well as some group training and workshops in the past. But I think you're right in Kim's thinking and conversation. How do you get to a cohort model or different models, ways to reach more folks in the field?
Which is a perfect segue. Thank you. You were much more articulate about it, and that's because you actually know it. So I'm grateful that I didn't have to translate. I'm grateful that I was smart enough to stop myself and just.
No, this is great. Thank you.
So then now this is one that I'm still a little unclear about. There's apparently a back office shared services experiment going on with 4 centers in the Seacoast.
And I can speak to that a little bit.
Thank you.
So that was a pilot effort. So coming out of CELA, the State Early Learning Alliance, the long-term goal is to get to that point where you can really help facilitate shared back office functions. So there is a pilot initiative funded by, in part, the United Way in the Seacoast through the Community Action Partnership of Stratford County, where they're already managing Head Start programs, childcare, and trying to bring in some other independent programs to provide some of those back office functions. There have been some bumps along the road in that pilot, but that is continuing in the Seacoast.
And so that was not funded by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. That was funded by the United Way.
And it may be the Charitable Foundation as well.
Okay, well, I'll keep digging on that one. That's good to know. And okay, thank you. So this is truly a shared services model. Okay, and that is underway, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
The centers have been identified and they're already in the process of doing.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then there's CELA, and now I can combine those two because now I understand that there is a kind of a threaded web kind of approach. Then there is the Monadnock Region Child Care Initiative, where Cheshire County, and this is where I'm getting ready to get on this call this afternoon, Cheshire County decided to use a lot of their ARPA funding to support early care and education. So they have a group of funding, some of it coming through the county from ARPA funds, some of it coming from the Charitable Foundation, some of it coming from the Monadnock Region United Way. We're starting to see a little pattern here, I think, of who the funders are in this space and what they're doing. They have basically, they've got two kind of prongs to it. One of it is workforce, and Keene State is taking a lead role in that around the education of the workforce. But there is also $500,000 that's been set aside for direct grants to providers with a maximum of $50K per provider. So up to 10 providers can get these grants. And the grants are for expansion or for capital needs, but there has to be a business plan in place. They've made that requirement a part of the deal. And so Hannah Grimes, which is the Center for Entrepreneurship, 25 years old in Cheshire County, who does this across the board, but has not done it with a sector specific, has done it with some sector specific focuses, but not this sector specific focus, has been tapped to work with the team on developing that part of the TA. So this is both TA, but this is both technical assistance and capital access in the best way possible, because we all love some free money, right? Like, I mean, that is the best way possible to move this through. They are just now having the kickoff meetings. And so the shape that this is going to take, and that's why I've, we've been talking to Kim, we've been talking to others about how to coordinate and collaborate efforts. Because this is the space that I work in all the time, which is the enterprise support. So that's what we're talking about there. And then the last little piece that I will do is this Maximize Tuition Revenues project that has been happening in Coos County, where this is basically working on the other side of the ledger. Most of these other efforts are working on the expense management side of the ledger and trying to find more resource by minimizing expenses. This is to try to find the sweet spot of resources to really take advantage of the supports that are there for families around tuition, but are often not well understood, and they're complicated. They have a lot of cash flow implications. They're not easy to make work on the provider side. And so figuring out how, because if, there are two ways to be able to pay people more, it's to increase revenues or reduce expenses, or ideally you do both. So that's a completely different sort of stream, but I think that it's a promising one from the business support side, because ideally you would be trying to work toward some models that have a sweet spot that capture both. You're operating as leanly as you possibly can with a focus on wages and salaries, and you are, but you're also making access possible by taking advantage of the state funding that's out there to support lower income, so increasing accessibility basically, but without destroying the business model. So that's what I have identified thus far. What we have really been talking about, I'll stop share right now. I mean, what we've really been talking about in our group, leaving aside all of the good recruitment and retention efforts that Amy and others in the group have really been identifying and driving forward, is how do we get these things aligned and take advantage, quite frankly, of the fact that really we have some really interesting things going on here. Because if you really want to figure out what works best, look at all of these essential pilots that are going on. And probably what I think we're going to find out is, like wraparound services in other sectors, like all of the above, yes, please, right? Like, can we have all of the above? And there may well be a way to have all of the above if we can collaborate instead of duplicate. And so I think that's really where the vital communities part comes in, is making sure that everybody's talking to each other and identifying places where enhanced collaboration or maybe some little funding for collaboration or those kinds of things could make a big difference to us being able to harvest all of the learnings that we're going to do over the next several years as all of these experiments play themselves out, right? And so that's, I think, where we are. Is that the summary you wanted from me, Joanne? I took a lot of time on this agenda, so.
That was fantastic. I wanted to thank you for that. You know, we met with Tracy Hutchins. So this is an example about how this kind of networking actually works, right? And we met with Tracy Hutchins, we brainstormed together, and you were like, aha, this is a direction that I can head. And you put the time and effort into it. And I'm so grateful for that. Two things that were floating through my head. One, I'm not only want to share it with this group, Allison, but with your nod, everybody. So we're all looking at it. And then I think that for December 5th meeting, Rebecca Holcomb will be here. I'm not sure of your schedule, Damien. I know you're super busy, but perhaps on December 19th, you could give us an overview of what you're working on specifically, so we could learn a little bit and I could find a time within there that fits for you. And you can just email me separately. And what I'm also thinking of is in January, because to know me, I'm always way out, is to think, can we pull from your list, Allison, of things that we want to share with advocacy to narrow it down, right? So these are the wants and the asks. What do we think from this committee we want to have advocacy advocate for? We use the model that we put together with our North Star and roles. That would go to our steering committee to say, through this, we funneled up to you. And then we can come back. So my thinking is this is such a great start. We don't want to lose this. I want to share it with everybody. December 5th, we have Rebecca. Perhaps on the 19th, we could learn more about Damien's experiences so far. It's so interconnected with what we're talking about here. And then in January, maybe we could take a look at where we might want to put things up to advocacy. Because now that we've waited for the elections, we said January was when we're going to really try to push things out. And I think that that might fit pretty well. Does that make sense for people as far as flow? I know other things will come up in our topics and agendas too, but I wanted to capture that for sure. Anything else that people want to mention in regard to what Allison just shared with us?
Oh, just saying this may be a good part of the focus on what I present on in the next time, and I may even think about whether I can bring in another member of the group to help with the presentation. It strikes me that we really are of kind of all of the above pilot project. Our business model really incorporates each of these various components that are being worked on separately as part of what we need and are relying on for success. A lot of it building off of what Let's Go Crids is already doing in terms of at least part of this side of what we need to do. So that may be an interesting component to also talk about in the terms of our project, is how we're taking those efforts that other people are doing and what they're projected to be in 5 years to design our project around that. So we have a center in place that can take advantage of the things that people are working on.
That would be excellent. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Any other business for today? We're getting very succinct in our conversations, I would have to say, as a group. We were kind of out there and now we're like, whoo, we've got this. Oh, Julie added a link to newhampshireconnections.org. That's on our chat. Let me check chat.
It's our childcare resource and referral agency.
Yeah, I couldn't find the business support part of it, Julie. So maybe could you put your email in
Sure.
the chat, and I'll be in touch with you, and maybe you can
Great.
guide me through, which is also a really good lesson about, what are some of the barriers to access? Because I think it's probably there, but they're using early care and education language, and I'm using business language, and
Yes.
we're not code switching in the right way. So that would be really helpful. Thank you, Julie.
That was my favorite, one of my favorite parts of my role with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund was being that translator with both business real estate experience and the childcare experience. I was that unusual unicorn that had experience in both worlds.
Great. I wanted to do a shout out to Tammy H for, she reached out to the folks who got voted in and took her time to do that. And in doing that, made an additional connection with Rebecca, then Rebecca to me, then to all of you. So it's these little acts of kindness and little acts of connection that really unify us as a group. So I'm thankful for her for doing that. With that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Hope you have a great rest of the day as well. Take care.
Thank you.